Hi there, my name is Jim Detmer. If you're watching this, you're probably interested in breeding horses. This presentation is really about what you need to do to prepare your mare for breeding season and just have everything ready to go. There's a lot to it, and so let's go ahead and dive right in. So if you want to know who I am, my name is Jim Detmer. I'm the breeding manager at Detmer's Rising Sun and also father to Weston and Holden. Um, my wife, Lauren, is in the middle there. She's our foaling manager and mother of Weston and Holden. And Weston and Holden are there on the right. I put them in because they're a couple of good looking fellas. And it's as much as anything, um, family is central to what we do. And got to have them in there. First and foremost, you really need to decide on your purpose for what you're breeding. You really need to think about why you're breeding and what you're going to do with the foal. A lot of people think that breeding is about getting that foal on the ground, and sometimes I wonder if people think about what's coming next for that foal. And the reason I have this particular picture on here is this is this is my son showing not a mare that we raised, but I owned this mare's sire, and this mare had a clear purpose from the time that her dam's owner called and said, we want to breed this mare. So what it's about, and the reason that I show this picture is because we want to really think about what do we want our horses to do once they're on the ground. What does this foal's entire life look like, and what goals do we have? Lots of folks breed and really are thinking about, okay, what's the first year look like? What's the first 2 years look like? Maybe even what's the first 3 years look like? But don't really consider, okay, are the decisions that I'm making about this horse and this cross that I'm making, is it going to meet that goal? So if I want a world caliber horse, are the bloodlines on the top and the bottom what I need to get there? Do the mare's lines and the stallion's lines contribute to, what events that I want this horse to be good for? Or am I intentionally breeding for something different? And that's completely fine. A lot of folks just want to go out and show at a weekend show, whether it's a breed show, whether it's an open show, or even 4-H. All those are acceptable reasons to breed a horse, but you need to be deliberate in your whole thinking process and what goes into making your cross, and really thinking through, if I'm going to own this horse for the rest of its life, am I going to be happy with these choices that I'm making? Because more than anything, you really need to consider that you might own this horse for the rest of its life, one way or another. And you need to really think through those things. You need to consider your budget for breeding. Costs can really get up there when you haven't really thought through that, and it really goes more than the stallion service fee. That's just the tip of the iceberg. If you're shipping, there's going to be a shipment fee for every time that the stallion has to be shipped, uh, has those genetics shipped to you or your vet. What kind of shoot fees, if you're taking your mare to the stallion, they're probably going to charge you a shoot fee if they're not breeding artificially. There's going to be vet fees or breeding manager fees associated with that. You really need to talk to folks as you're considering what those fees are and really lining up who you're going to be working with, what that whole component looks like. You also need to think about what it's going to cost to keep a broodmare for an entire year. Those are costs that people don't really consider. If your purpose is to breed and get a foal because, oh, well, I've already got this mare here. I'm not doing anything with her. Well, maybe that mare could be put to better use in another way if if that's really your only consideration, because there are a lot of costs associated with that keeping. I mean, just feed and all of those things. You're really going to need to consider that. And you also need to have in your budget for when things don't go the way that they're supposed to, because they don't always do. Most of the time, they don't always do. So you need to be considerate of that as well. You don't want to get so far in that you all of a sudden realize you don't have the funds to continue. So be very aware and cognizant of that as you're planning your breeding season. We've already talked a little bit about a mare that you might already have, but you really have to consider that. Going back to what we talked about at the beginning of this discussion is what type of mare, what are your goals? So if you already have a mare, how old is she, and what's her status? And when I say status, I mean, has she been bred before? How did that go? And that can roll into back to the discussion of budget. If it was expensive and difficult to get her in foal before, it's probably going to be again, and you need to consider that as part of your budget. Older mares, they are extremely valuable in their contribution of genetics to the industry, but they can be difficult to get in foal. So you have to consider that as well. Maiden mares that have never foaled, if they're aged, can be extremely difficult. Talk to your vet about what your options are, what he or she thinks that you ought to be doing, and what what you should consider with a mare that you've already got. Now, if you're looking to go out and get a mare that is new to you, you need to think about, okay, am I leasing or buying this mare? What are the good things and the bad things about leasing? Well, if you're leasing, you still have to keep that mare for an entire year, and you got to think about, okay, what what is going to make the owner happy when they get that mare back, and really defining all of those in some sort of a contract before you take on that mare at your barn or whatever you're doing. So if you're going to look at buying a mare, there are certain advantages to that for sure, because you're not going to have um, those sunk costs that you would with a lease, depending on the terms of your lease. But at the same time, you're still going to have a lot of expenses, and you're going to have that mare regardless of whether or not she gets in foal. So be be thoughtful and be considerate of both those things, and make sure that she's ready to be able to be bred if you're going out to buy her. Do a pre-purchase exam on her. Um, Even if you think, oh well, we're not she's broodmare sound, which means maybe she's had a show career, maybe she's not as sound as she should be in the show pen, but she can still have a great life as a broodmare, absolutely, and those are great mares to get a hold of. But you need to look under her tail. Is she sunk behind? And if you don't know what that means, talk to your vet about that. He'll tell you, she'll tell you. um, if she's open, why is she open? Is she a maiden mare, meaning she's never been bred before, or did she have trouble getting settled last time with her previous owners? Those are huge, huge things. Have that breeding soundness exam done. Pull some hair, send it in for genetic testing. Look for certain diseases. Are there certain attributes? We breed paint horses, so genetic attributes are pretty important to us. As far as color goes, the mare in this picture here is in Tobiano, which has certainly some really good qualities in being able to pass that color on. But there's also some genetic diseases that you have to be aware of. HERDA, GBED, PSSM, HYPP, all of those things. Are they things that you can live with? Absolutely. But you need to make sure that you're willing to live with them and be aware of what the status of your mare is so that you can make those good choices when you're choosing a stallion. Speaking of choosing a stallion, this is a stallion that I am very proud to stand. His name is, he's a special hot rod, and we really like him. As you can see, he's a pretty gentle guy here with my two boys. This particular picture was taken at a horse expo, and um, we just absolutely love this horse. But all that aside, you really need to consider what your budget is. If you are breeding a horse for yourself and you're just going to the weekend shows, you may not want to spend a whole bunch of money on a stud fee. However, most of the time, what I find is the value of the foal, the resulting foal, can be dramatically increased by a high quality stallion. So the difference in those fees, those stud fees, is minuscule compared to what you're going to pay for the cost of shipping, the cost of getting that mare in full, your vet fees, taking that care of that mare for the year. Really do your homework and consider your budget. Talk to the stallion owner, because that is an important thing. But make sure that the stallion you're choosing is appropriate for what your goals are. Talk to the stallion owner about fertility. If they're not breeding a ton of mares a year, that doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing, but it may mean that they are not as in tune to what the fertility looks like. What have the babies done? If you're looking at a young stallion, you may not know how the babies are going to be, and there's not a problem with that. You can usually find a good deal in terms of stud fee for younger stallion, because they're trying to get more mares bred to them and get those babies out there. But you also really need to get an idea of what customer service from that stallion owner is going to be. This is a huge thing, and one of the things that happens in our industry more often than we'd like to think about. That customer service isn't about what you're going to get when things are going well, but what you're going to get when things don't go perfectly. Okay. You also need to talk to the to the stallion farm, wherever he's standing. If he's standing, with folks, what does that look like? What does a collection and breeding schedule look like? Are they shipping live, fresh? Is it live cover only? Is it fresh, cooled semen? Is it only frozen semen? I've worked with stallion owners before that only wanted to do frozen semen because they were still showing the stallion. All of those come with advantages and disadvantages. Live cover stallions are usually a little bit more affordable in terms of what it costs for shoot fees and that sort of thing. But there's risk to your mare, because your mare is going to be off premises for a little bit, and there's certainly some danger to the breeding process when you're using a live stallion that you don't have with artificial technology. So fresh cooled is certainly probably the most simple in terms of more advanced breeding technology. You're going to call for the semen, they're going to ship it overnight to you or your vet. The insemination process. Frozen is certainly much more complex. If you're going to do that, make sure that you've got a good repro vet that you're working with, or a good repro farm that can handle frozen semen and has experience doing that. And really definitely talk to that farm again about customer service. What does that look like when people have trouble, when FedEx doesn't come like it should? What if you're breeding live cover? What do the other horses on the farm look like? Are they skinnier than what you'd like to see? Are they a little heavier than what you'd like to see? And most of all, if I can say anything, talk to your friends. We all have friends in the industry. We all know how much we like to talk. So talk to your friends about what their experiences have been with a stallion owner, with a stallion farm. You're going to find out a lot of information. Um, Take it to heart. Some of it may be true, some of it may not be, but at least you're going to go in with your eyes wide open. And don't be afraid to ask for references from the stallion owner and the stallion farm. Okay, now you have your mare, you have your stallion, now you've got to get your mare ready. And this is really critical because you want to be prepared when it's time to get that mare in full. What is her status? We talked a little bit about maiden versus unbred versus mares that have foaled before. You know, if they're open, a maiden mare, if they're young and in good shape, are usually some pretty fertile, uh, pretty fertile animals. Exception being thoroughbred mares that are right off the track. They usually take some time to get back in where they are breedable because they've been athletes for a while and maybe need some time away from that scene to be cycling normally. Unbred mares, I listed unbred mares compared to maiden mares because you may have a mare where they attempted breeding, the mare for whatever reason didn't take. If it's your own mare and you had that experience, then you probably know some history on it. But if it's not your mare, you just have the information that the previous owner has given to you. So be aware of that. Make sure that you're getting cultures and cytologies on those types of mares. Um, if they have foaled before and they're open, you should definitely be thinking about a culture and cytology because you don't really know why they're open if it's not one of your own. Once you have all of those things thought through and thought out, you can start thinking about putting them under lights. And when I say put them under lights, what we do at my farm is we put our mares that we're wanting to breed earlier than their natural estrus, we put them under timed lights for 18 hours a day. And the lights turn off at night and then they switch back on automatically in the morning. We do like 18 hours. It seems to work really well for us. I also recommend blankets, although there's some information out there that says, oh, you don't really need blankets. It really probably depends on where you're at, but definitely light can help you manipulate that estrus cycle to bring them into season earlier. There is no magic shot to bring them into season, so you really need to be having them under lights if you are planning to breed early. If you have open mares, again, you're going to want to think about cultures and cytologies. If they have a bacterial infection or anything like that, that culture and cytology is going to tell you hopefully what they have and how bad it is. And you and your vet or breeding manager are going to be able to come up with treatments and those types of things to get them to where they need to be at the beginning of your breeding season instead of trying to play catch up and wondering why isn't this mare in full. I also recommend talking to your veterinarian, particularly if you're doing shipped or frozen shipped hormone therapy, so that you know when your mare is cycling, when they're probably going to ovulate, what that's going to look like, so you can time those things out well. There's lots of options these days. They work pretty well, and your veterinarian is going to help lead you through that cycle. I also want you to consider ultrasounding and monitoring of their pre-breeding cycle if you don't have a history on them. So before you go into that first breeding cycle, you want to know what size follicle they make. The follicle is what holds that egg before it is released into the fallopian tubes and down into the uterus post fertilization. But so that follicle, we can track the size of that follicle and ovulation with an ultrasound. And different mares make different size follicles. Many mares will ovulate at a low 40 millimeter, in the low 40 millimeter size um, follicles. Other mares will get very large follicles when I've seen mares that had 52s, 55s plus, and there's even some breeds that get even larger than that. Most mares do what they did before, so having a history on that is very helpful. If you don't have a history, an ultrasound to monitor that, it can be a huge advantage. If your mare is already bred, you need to think about, okay, when is the due date? Is she a maiden mare? If she's a maiden mare, you can't be really sure of when how long is she going to go. Usually a mare will go about as long as she went before in terms of gestation. So it having that history is extremely helpful. Again, um, if you've got a seasoned mare, that's a good thing. If you're planning on breeding during the foal heat, which is the 7 to 10 day post foaling, a mare will ovulate. It is more difficult to get a mare in foal during foal heat than it is other cycles, just because their uterus has obviously been through some serious trauma, and it's just difficult. So you might want to consider waiting, but if you want to move your mare's foaling date up the following year so that you're foaling 3 weeks earlier than what you did this current, that first year, then a full heat breeding is certainly an option, but definitely talk to your breeding manager or veterinarian about some of the complications and what can go on with that full heat. There are some post-foaling hormone therapies that you can do to really help that mare out if you're considering that full heat breeding. So definitely talk to them about that. So if you're getting ready to start breeding, you're going to want to start tracking your mare's cycle. If you have a stallion, that's the best case scenario. If you do not have an ultrasound handy, tease your mare frequently to see where she's at. If you don't have a stallion, just do your best with whatever her behavior is. How do you normally tell she's in heat? I've gotten more phone calls than I'd like to tell you about a mare owner that called and said, "Hey, my mare started teasing today. I'm going to have the vet out tomorrow and see where she's at in her cycle. I'm probably going to need a shipment soon." And 9 times out of 10, that means that is the day that the mare is ovulating, and we've probably already missed the cycle. So be aware of those things going in, mark those things on a calendar. You don't have to have the vet out every time she starts to cycle to track those. Just be aware of when she's acting like she's in heat. What does that look like? And do mark it on a calendar. Cycle is usually 21 days. That doesn't mean that it will be every time, but often mares stick with their cycle that they usually have. You'll also notice too that weather can affect a heat cycle, so be aware of that. Keep those things monitored and that sort of thing. And we do use a monitoring scale here at the farm, 1 through 5 scale, 1 being she's completely disinterested in the stallion, all the way to 5 where she's really interested in the stallion and would like him to do his job. So that would mean that she's lifting her tail, backing up to him. A 3 would kind of be in the middle of that, where she will tolerate the stallion, but she really doesn't want him too awfully close to her, or let alone breeding her. So, and obviously a 2 and a 4 is going to be in between the 1 and 3 and 3 and 5. So just kind of be aware of those scales and mark your calendar down. this is really the conclusion of what I had to talk about with you. It it's really important to make all these considerations and start this process as soon as you can and be thinking through these things. Get out a piece of paper, write out your plan. If you have any questions, talk with somebody that has been through it before. What mistakes did they make? Um, horse people, they like to share. And what can you learn from those types of things? And just make sure you're ready. It's a fun process. I know that my family absolutely loves all of it from start to finish, whether it's going out at 3 in the morning to see that foal on the ground and getting it dried off and waiting, to get it up and nursing and that sort of thing. Um, Getting your mare ready is the first step, and these are all important things. They need to be thoughtfully planned out. If they are thoughtfully planned out, you have a much higher opportunity for success. Of course, the reason that I am doing these is selfishly, I would love for you to take a look at what we do at Detmer's Rising Sun. We have a couple of nice stallions that we've got here at the farm. We've always got babies for sale. Maybe you figure out, well, this is not something. This breeding thing is not something that's for me. But I'd still like to have a nice foal. I can certainly help you out with that. We can help you out with any of those points along the process. We love what we do, and we just enjoy it. And if there's anything we can ever do for you, please let us know. Don't hesitate to call. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.